The Vekoma SLC, the suspended looping coaster. In other words, the inverted coaster, where you are dangling below the track. This particular model, made by Vekoma, is widely considered to be one of the worst coasters, if not the very worst roller coaster on planet Earth. The standard Vekoma SLC is a cloned model, and you can find them just about everywhere. There are so many of these around, and coaster enthusiasts love to hate on them. Now, if this was all just a running joke, then I wouldn't have a problem with it. I enjoy a running gag as much as anyone, and I'd be willing to join in on it. However, this doesn't seem like a running joke, even though jokes do get made about it. Many coaster enthusiasts will, in all seriousness, say that this is the worst coaster ever. Taylor at Coaster Studios calls it his least favorite roller coaster of all. Logan at Coaster Kids refuses to even ride them. He hears so many bad things about them that he feels it's not worth getting the coaster credit to get on a ride that's terrible and is going to ruin his day. And that does make sense, but what if the coaster actually isn't that bad? Sometimes you ought to just go ahead and ride it and see for yourself if it's actually bad. You might find out that it's all been fake news and the coaster is actually okay. And so with that mindset, let's talk more about the Vekoma SLC. People say that it's a massive headbanger, that it's extremely rough, it'll give you a terrible headache, it'll ruin your day, it'll make you not want to ride anything else, it'll bash your head around so badly. Well, my very first Vekoma SLC came in July 2017 when I rode Gauntlet at Magic Springs in Hot Springs, Arkansas. At that time, I didn't really know a lot about coasters, even though I had ridden about 90 different coasters by then. I didn't even know that Cedar Fair was a thing. I knew about Cedar Point, but I thought it was its own thing. I didn't realize it was a part of a parent company, that Cedar Fair, which was over a whole bunch of different parks. I had never heard of RMC. I didn't know what it was, even though I had ridden 3 of them at that time. So in my knowledge, I was very much GP, which stands for General Public. So with that being very recent for me, I don't find it cool or funny to make fun of the GP. So what if they're not interested in knowing every little detail about coasters? But at that time I did cringe when I heard myself say that Gauntlet was their version of Batman the Ride. Batmans are made by B&M and have a much better reputation. At least I did follow that up by saying that Gauntlet looked a little bit different than the Batmans. And then I rode Gauntlet, the Vekoma SLC, and I really liked it. I even went back to get another ride on it. In fact, it's the best ride in the park. X Coaster was unique, but all it is the sky loop. It doesn't do anything else other than the loop. The wooden coaster was okay, but it had some jackhammering. The Vekoma SLC was the smoothest ride that had the most going for it in the park. A month after that visit, I stumbled upon Coaster Studios' video analysis of Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. That took my interest in coasters to the next level and beyond. That night and then the following few days, I learned so much about roller coasters and amusement parks. And one of the things I learned is how horrible the Vekoma SLCs apparently are. I thought that maybe I just happened to ride the only good one. So over the following year and a half, I would more than double my coaster count from 91 to 200. And I was still sitting at only that one Vekoma SLC. Until the last weekend of March 2019 when I visited Wild Adventures in Valdosta, Georgia. They have a Vekoma SLC by the name of Twisted Typhoon. I got on it, and sure enough, once again, it was a very good ride. I rode it 2 more times later in that day, and those were good enough also. I said at the start that the SLC is once again the best ride in the park, although I ended the day liking their rough wooden coaster better. But in regards to smoothness and intensity combined, Twisted Typhoon is by far the best ride in the park. So I'm still here scratching my head, wondering why the Vekoma SLC has gotten so much hate. Is it possible that these are the only 2 good ones and the rest are all terrible? I guess it is possible, but I'm really starting to doubt that now. So let's go over the pros and cons of this ride. And since I tend to be a very positive person, I'm going to start with the cons just to get the negatives out of the way. So con number 1, they are everywhere. As I said, this is a cloned model. You can find these in so many places. For some coaster enthusiasts, when they reach 200 coaster credits, 10 of them could be Vekoma SLCs. But as I said, for me, it was only 1 of the first 200. But I can see someone getting sick of riding them if they've ridden so many of them. Con number 2, the layout. I will be contradicting this statement in the pros, but let's just say that the layout isn't all that spectacular. Some people have called the layout dumb, which I think is overly dramatic, but it's not an incredibly interesting layout. Con number 3, the duration. It is a short ride. If you count the time from the start of the drop to the final brakes, it's about 38 seconds long. To counter that, though, Batman the Ride clones are the exact same duration. And many rides that get a lot of praise aren't that much longer. For example, Intimidator 305. If you also only count from the drop to the final brakes, it's only 45 seconds long. So 38 seconds might be on the shorter side, but not by a whole lot. Anything over 45 to 50 seconds of high-speed action is considered to be a very long ride. The RMC Raptors are only 25 seconds of action, and those get a lot of praise. Con number 4 is the closed-in feeling of the restraints. The restraints that they have are so huge and bulky that you have practically no peripheral vision. Part of the thrill of roller coasters is the exposure to the elements. This is why us enthusiasts love it when there are only lap bars, because our entire upper body has full exposure to the elements and what the ride is doing. Part of the exposure is also your vision. Not only is your upper body constrained by the restraints of the SLC, but so is your vision. You can only see straight in front of you. You can try to lean forward to see more, but that only does so much for you. But now let's look at the pros, which I believe severely outweigh the cons, and those cons are kind of nitpicky, to be quite honest with you. Pro number 1 is the smoothness, and it's probably gonna trigger some people, but let's get real here. Vekoma coasters might have a little bit of bumpiness to them, but B&M coasters tend to have a rattle. Some rattles are worse than others. And in my opinion, the B&M rattle is far worse than the slight bumpiness in the Vekoma track. I have no problem at all with how Vekomas ride on the track. I would say that the 2 SLCs that I've ridden are relatively smooth. And pro number 2 is the layout. I know I put this on the con as well, but let me explain. If you have ridden tons of B&Ms like I have, they start to all kind of feel like the same thing. The elements are all the same, just in a different order. Whether you're riding an invert, a floorless, a sit-down, they all seem to do the same things. So if that's what you've gotten used to, and then you finally ride a Vekoma SLC, you're going to really like how different the elements are. The initial double inversion after the drop is called a rollover, which is a very unique sensation that I quite enjoyed. The third inversion is called a Sidewinder, which is similar to the Immelman that B&Ms do, but it has a different exit, and therefore it feels quite different. The final inversions are a double inline twist, which I think is the highlight of the ride. This is another maneuver that B&Ms typically don't do. You can find a single inline twist on Banshee, which I'm a big fan of, but I really enjoy doing the 2 inline twists in a row on the SLC. So maybe the layout isn't all that spectacular, and it can't match up with awesome layouts that you have on Banshee or Montu, for example, but it is unique by comparison to B&Ms. Plus, the SLC isn't meant to be a world-class, top-of-the-line invert. It's meant to be a middle-of-the-road and more affordable coaster. It allows smaller parks on more of a budget to get a good, but not great, quality thrill ride. Pro number 3 is the restraints. As restrictive as the restraints are, they are quite comfortable. My first ride on Twisted Typhoon, the restraints in my seat were like pillows. Even if the ride was a major headbanger, which it isn't, it still wouldn't hurt in the slightest because I had these soft pillows right next to my head. My later 2 rides were in different seats, and those head restraints were not quite as soft as pillows, but they were still quite soft. I did get my head thrown into those a couple of times on the ride, but it wasn't that violent, and it didn't hurt in the slightest. B&M over-the-shoulder restraints, however, those do hurt, and they can hurt a lot. You can get terrible headaches from those restraints. Any slight side-to-side movement on those coasters are going to produce horrible headbanging, unless you find a good way to ride it. I am starting to figure out a good way to ride it that works for me, but B&Ms don't make it easy. These Vekoma restraints make it very easy. Your head hitting into those restraints won't hurt at all. You won't get a headache. Your day won't get ruined. You'll be fine to continue riding other coasters or to re-ride the SLC as much as you want. All of that cannot be guaranteed on B&Ms with those over-the-shoulder restraints that put those rock-hard bars right next to your head. I find it amazing that a park that has one of those B&Ms might be having an extremely busy day, yet the B&M doesn't have much of a line. While coaster enthusiasts are figuring out how to handle those B&M over-the-shoulder restraints, the general public doesn't ride them enough to figure it out. All they know is that it hurts, and they don't want to ride it again. That's why Kumba at Busch Gardens Tampa never had much of a line for me, even though the park was slammed. But the SLCs don't require any special way to ride it correctly. You'll have a good ride experience with those restraints no matter what. That's why the SLCs are still quite popular among the general public. Just to clarify, I mentioned Kumba there. I love Kumba. It is my new favorite ride at Busch Gardens Tampa. But yeah, a lot of people were telling me that they get headbanging on that and they don't like it. You got to find a good way to ride it, and you don't have to do that with the SLCs. You're going to get a good ride no matter what. So basically what I'm saying here is that the Vekoma SLC is actually a good roller coaster model. Is it the best in the world? No, of course not. It's not going to make my top 25 either, or even in my top 50 out of the 218 that I've ridden. But it is a good roller coaster. It's not something that you need to avoid. It's not something to worry about. Don't go in expecting something the level of Montu or Banshee either. Those are excellent inverts. The Vekoma SLC is a good invert. And just to clarify, I've been a little critical here of B&M, but that's only to make my point. I have 7 B&M coasters in my top 25, but I have 0 Vekoma coasters in my top 50. So by no means am I saying that the Vekoma is as good as B&M. I'm just making the point that B&M does indeed have flaws that most coaster enthusiasts like to ignore. And at the same time, coaster enthusiasts like to ignore the positives of Vekoma and exaggerate the negatives. So what do you think? Am I just crazy? Am I just incapable of feeling pain? I don't think so, because plenty of B&M coasters have caused me pain, either with their restraints or with the rattle. Or is it that I just happen to ride the only 2 good SLCs in existence? Let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you for watching.